quick lunch. I hope everyone's filled up. But yeah, let's just continue on, and I'm gonna invite Aravinda. Aravinda is also a Jeevan Sati of AID, and she's very passionate about social and environmental justice. A lot of her work has been devoted towards that, and she's within AID. She's very active in the publications team, and she's worked a lot to get the message out and make the marginalized people the focus, and make sure that people get the message that they are the ones who can bring about change. And as we've all seen, she's very passionate, and she brings about this vibe of energy. Everyone can feel it, and just waiting for you to take over.
So, yeah, I felt the energy. All right, can we ask everyone to come now that we're a more intimate audience?
Yeah, the energy reaches all the way, but
No.
yeah, sure.
let's share that positive. Okay, what do I do here?
So just say,
It'll just
yeah,
only do one at a time, right?
we can turn it and whenever you want.
All right, so it's really great to be at the Asha conference. I've learned a lot about Asha as well as about education and the different approaches that you're all taking in the projects in these 2 days. So actually, when Ravi first sent me the invitation on behalf of Asha to come to the conference, the website or somewhere, it just already gave the title of my talk. And so that was probably just a typo, but then I just went ahead and followed that and used that. Now I should just give you a disclaimer that, I mean, we're going to be covering a lot of ground. There's going to be a lot of rambling, and there's going to be mixed metaphors, but I think there's also going to be a thread connecting what I'm going to talk about. I've had a lot to think about being here yesterday, so some of the things I might rush through, and that's just so that maybe we'll have time for questions at the end to whatever struck you as being the most interesting. So, since we're after lunch, it's the second day, we're a small crowd, wanted to just liven things up with a few quiz questions. They're not quiz, they're open-ended questions. Okay, let's see here.
You can use the clicker. Use the clicker. Yes.
Okay, so we are going to watch a scene of this movie. Okay. Can you hear it?
No, wait.
It's probably obvious, but I guess I should give you just a small background. The Zamindar's grandson has fallen in love with a daughter of an outcast man. Finally, the condition for the two to get married is that once she marries the Zamindar's grandson, her father will be permanently disconnected from her. And so now the question is, will he accept this condition? She should no longer be, she'll now be the Zamindar's granddaughter-in-law, but her birth family will not be associated with her anymore. So here is, he's another son of the Zamindar, and he is the outcast man whose daughter is, being offered this marriage with this condition. Okay, so now the Zamindar, can you see what the Zamindar has offered? Mm-hmm. See, first all he said was, the condition that he set was that he leave. This wasn't initially part of the condition. Now that he accepted the condition to sweeten the deal, he's come and offered this. Okay, what do you think Kotaya should do?
he will refuse.
Yeah. How many think that he should refuse?
Should or
Well,
will?
it's not a question of should.
Okay, we'll first do should and then we do will. Okay? How many people think that he should refuse? I see 5, 6 hands. Okay. How many people think he should accept? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. How about, and how many are abstained? Okay. And some didn't respond even then. Okay, that was whether he should refuse or should accept. How many people think he will refuse? Oh, wow. Okay. How many people think he will accept? Okay. Now, that's very interesting. So a lot more people thought he would refuse. I mean, only 5 or 6 people thought he should refuse, but at least 10 or 12 people thought he would refuse. So can you tell me what gives you so much confidence that he will refuse? Okay.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have shown this.
Because I feel like it'll be like selling his daughters.
Because it would be like selling his daughters. Okay.
It's more of an emotional reaction than a financial decision.
Oh, if it were a financial decision, he would.
So it's not a question of whether I'm getting this as a source of financial stability for my older age, and I don't have to rely on my daughter for the financial stability, but it's rather more of an emotional decision that it feels like I'm selling my daughter.
Yeah, by taking money, he might feel that he's now contractually obligated.
Whereas otherwise he might still have the opportunity to, which is maybe the reason that they are sweetening the deal in the first place.
Yeah.
Come to think of it.
I only have thoughts on the daughter, by the way.
Hmm?
I only have thoughts about the daughter.
What are your thoughts about the daughter?
Why would she do this?
So anyway, we will come back to this. I'm not going to show you the rest of the scene right now. Now, how do I? Now, see, I still have one more question. See, there are people who thought that he should accept, right? But then didn't raise their hand to the second question that he would accept, right? So, any of you want to share your thoughts? You thought that he should accept, but he actually wouldn't.
So I think he should accept it because there's already injustice being done to him.
Mm-hmm.
So just like Pradeep was saying, maybe he can at least, he's already losing his emotional, his emotional future with his daughter, but maybe he can at least take up the financial stability for the rest of his giving that he's in his old age. But then I said would because, I mean, looks like he's one of the central characters in a movie.
So you're looking at the logic of it's a movie, so why would they do that? Kind of like Kiali said, why would you show it, right? But you can, I mean, if it were not a movie, if you imagine a real person in such a situation, there would you say that, maybe he should accept, but he didn't?
Again, along the same lines is, yes, I mean, the decision, the whole moral decision is very subjective, but then also, if you've already lost, I think the bargain is not fair to him overall. Mm-hmm. So I think walking away from the bargain with like nothing to show, except for like a moral victory, as opposed to, okay, at least I got something out of it in the sense that I was able to shore up my financial future. So
okay, so you've meant there are two things that he can walk away with: moral victory or financial future.
Right.
Okay, so that's the choice before him.
Right.
Okay, we're gonna pause it. We're gonna hold it right there.
But if they're willing to offer him money now, then what comes down the line later? If you're accepting this money now, then doesn't that put you on the line for other moral decisions that you don't foresee
maybe
later?
Okay, now can I?
Present.
Okay, wait. What do I do now?
You want to go to the presentation?
You would just go back to the next slide. How do we do that?
We're playing directly from the drive.
Oh, I did?
Present again.
Okay.
Just F5.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
But it's like cutting on the top.
Is that the top?
Just go back.
Okay. All right. I think we're okay. Yeah, so I wanted to share some things that I feel that I've learned over these 2 decades. It's an ongoing learning process. As you know, I joined AID in 1995 as a volunteer, just like all of you. I was in college in Boston, and I had actually worked in a school in a village in Kadapa district in Andhra Pradesh for a few months. I like, I like talking, I like sharing, so I like teaching in that sense. I wasn't a trained teacher, but I enjoyed doing it. And it was a small village school, and I somehow, through connections, I knew somebody who was in a position to offer me that opportunity to teach in that school. And because I went to school here all of, through high school and college and all, and the rote learning aspect was definitely jarring. And so one thing that I felt was really important was libraries. Libraries were always important to me as a child. It was literally like my second home. I went there all the time. I think one of the libraries has a big notice on its a big board that says the library is the public living room. So it's a community space. It's a space of free learning where nobody is monitoring what book you're reading, whether you learned something from it, and all of that kind of stuff. So I wanted to bring that to the kids I was working with. I felt like this is something that could really that they could benefit from. So this is the seed of what eventually led me to get a degree in library science, eventually get involved with AID, and then Ravi and I got married, and then we went to India, and one of the projects we did, first things we did was start village libraries at some level, but we got involved in other aspects as well. And AID, as you heard yesterday from Ravi's presentation, addresses development as a whole. The issues are, even as Anuragji also mentioned, that things are interconnected in intricate and unknowable ways. And we wanted to embrace all of it. And what we learned soon after arriving is that development, education, health, good life, livelihood, questions that Richa was also asking, we don't know what these mean. Like they say in that movie, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. And this applied to all of these terms. And so we had to rethink, what is development? Who decides what development is? One of the first movements that we jumped into right in this front and center was the Narmada movement. We were there during submergence. And because the Narmada movement is a central movement in India, it attracted people from struggles as well as NGOs from all over the country. So through that, we got connected. And because we were also helping to build AIDS outreach to NGOs all over India, we got involved with a number of organizations that way. So one of the questions that pertains to development as well as to education that we really have to face head on is, are we looking for education for all or education for the few? Because there are a lot of initiatives in education that may look like they deliver tangible results quickly, are only ready to deliver to the few. To really achieve education for all, what does that even involve? What way of looking at the world does that involve? So it includes us, and so we have a lot to learn. So I'd like to introduce you to some of the people from whom we have learned along the way. From the beginning, we recognize that education is a reciprocal process. When we go, development is not something that we have and somebody else doesn't, and therefore we can give it to them. It's not like we know what health and education are, and only some other people, need to get it, and so we can help them. It's the journeys are interconnected, and so that's been a recurring theme in everything that we have done. So, all right, we're going to start with another little question. This is a project. This is I wanted to have us hear some of the questions from the voices of the children. This is a school in Bombay, a BMC school, and this is a program called Sangati, which Asha also supports and AID also supports. It is one of the few programs that actually raises social issues of inequality, caste, gender, geography, all kinds of social issues in the social studies curriculum, draws on children's experiences, has no grades. So children are truly free to give, I mean, in theory, they're truly free to give any answer that they believe in. They're encouraged to explore. So this is a program being implemented in the curriculum, and now they have had a lesson on Savitribai Phule, who was a fighter for women's education in Maharashtra. And so now, to start us off with that warm, fuzzy feeling that we get when we see school children talking in the class, we're going to hear what she has to say about that. There are going to be some subtitles later, but should I tell you what she's saying? She's talking about the conventional approach to education for girls, or to girls, and so she's describing all the kinds of injustices that girls have to face in society, starting from not being born to different, extra burden of household work from a young age. And then she mentions one thing, that some people put their daughters into the government school and their sons into the private school. Now that that is an example of education for the few and education for all. The government school is the model that is based on the idea of education for all. Private school is content with education for some. Now, when you vote with your feet, for education for some, like when you go to the private school and therefore are casting your vote in favor of education for the few, why are you doing that?
Because you think the government school is not good enough.
So that's the typical answer, because you think the government school is not good enough, but it means that you actually don't believe that there will be education for all. See, if you don't think that there's going to be lunch for all, right? If you think there's only going to be lunch for 20% of the people in this room, and let's just say that everybody is really, really hungry and we don't know whether we'll have lunch tomorrow, then the typical response would be to make sure that I'm in that 20%. And if you think tomorrow it actually might only be available to 10%, then by whatever criteria that 20% is being determined, actually it's not enough to be in the 20%, you have to be in the 10%. Maybe your children have to be in the 1%. So that's the dominant paradigm of development and education that we have in India, that we're only going to have, and the world actually, we're only going to have enough for the few. So if you still believe in education for all, then you're on your own. If you believe in education for few, then like Kotaya being offered the plate, you're going to have to take that plate.
But it's also a matter of the point of view that the parents take when they are sending the kids, or when they decide to send the kids to one school versus the other, because their only interest in mind is to provide the kids with the best education that they can afford to, and that's what they do. I mean, they're not making a conscious decision of believing or not believing in education for the few. Right?
Well, I think it reflects that. If they really believed that there was enough for all, then why would they compete for the few?
They are not competing. They just have the kids' best interest in mind.
Yes, obviously. Yeah. It's in your kids' best interest to be in that 10%, because the other 90% aren't going to survive.
No, but if the government schools had, or the perceived value of the government education was as good as the private schools, they won't care. My parents went to government schools and they did really well. And so they understand that government schools can work. But then when I was growing up, that was not the case. So
Right, right. Yeah, I think that actually the team of AHI Abacus that provides this curriculum to the Bombay Municipal Corporation, their view is actually that there should be no private schools, and that, you know, if everybody was in the same system, then we all have skin in the game, we'll all be at stake in making that system work. So, well, let's keep this topic open. I'll just keep going. We'll hear what she has to say. And so the teacher is then going to ask, she's describing the conventional view of towards girls and women in education, and then the teacher's going to ask them a question. There I do have subtitles.
घर के अंदर का काम औरत का काम और घर के बाहर का काम पुरुष का काम। अंदर का काम मम्मी का काम, बाहर का काम पापा का काम, बराबर। लेकिन अभी क्या हो गया है, अभी समाज में बदल गया। क्या बदलाव आपको देखने को मिला? आपको इससे पहले मैंने एक चार्ट भी दिया है कि नहीं? तेरे मुंह बने।
Okay. Any observations on the second segment where you have the subtitles?
The teacher is a man, which is record.
He's also telling them.
He's telling about gender equality, but it's a male telling about, talking about gender.
She wanted to express something, but she was kind of, he kind of sidestepped her.
Yeah, so can we be more specific?
I think she was wanting to express something about the word division when they were discussing about it, but then I guess he just got into the topic of the chart or something. So
I don't know if it was very clear. I mean, he has told them that, let's just read that briefly.
औरत का काम और घर के बाहर का काम पुरुष का काम। अंदर का काम मम्मी का काम, बाहर का काम पापा का काम, बराबर। लेकिन अभी क्या हो गया है, अभी समाज में बदल गया। क्या बदलाव आपको देखने को मिला?
They're actually so keen to pick it up as well. They look very keen to be learning it and happily learning it. They're not.
Okay. Did you have a comment?
It's a little bit like rote learning.
In what way?
Well, they're saying that के अंदर का काम, मम्मी का काम, घर के बाहर का काम, and he waits and then they repeat it. Well, like they also repeat it with him, and then they just, and then like, he asks the question and then they answer. And then they answer.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed was that it's not really a question. I don't know the context of what the lesson was about, but it's something that he's stating.
Well, I think that he is very much invested in the message that society has changed, right? And I gave you a chart about this, so it's like I have definitely done my duty of teaching you that this has changed. So now he's going to ask them how it has changed.
आपको इससे पहले मैंने एक चार्ट भी दिया है कि नहीं? औरत तेरे मुंह बने। मैं आपको दिखा के उसके बारे में आपको क्या राय है? तो बोलेंगे हम क्या?
Okay. So I'm going to show you the rest later. So the first example of this change is that now women also go out to work. Now, what would be the corresponding change that we should also have? Men are also engaging in housework. I just will give away the ending. That point never comes up. Okay. So that's an aside. But the other part, I don't know how clear it was just from these few seconds. But even in this curriculum that is designed to help people reflect upon their own experiences, there's so much anxiety to get that right answer, that yes, society has changed, and that now we read this lesson on Savitribai Phule, we're not going to go home thinking that society hasn't changed. we're not going to go home thinking that, you know, women aren't able to get education and get jobs. So we have to reach that that happy ending in the classroom. So I'm just sharing this with you because we are all. This is not something that we would, you know, when we're describing the project in other settings, we'll focus on its strengths. And it's tremendously, this is a model which I think we should really build on and extend to other schools. But I'm just showing, even in this case, because of the limitations of that classroom environment, this pressure to you know, give the answer that the teacher wants is still something very hard to escape. So that we will return to that. Okay. Oops.
क्या काम करते हैं आपकी जानकारी में कौन कौन सा काम मदद कर रही है आप बोलो
Somebody has to. Yeah. The next few slides, I'm just showing some other programs where we have interacted with school children. Even though the focus of our work has not been education, children are everywhere, and the easiest place to, I mean, typically when we visit a village, stay in a village, we do meet the children in the context of their school setting. So here's an example of children in the Narmada Valley. In the lower corner, you see one of their residential schools in Manibeli village. I'm sorry to report that that's underwater now because of the Sardar Sarovar Dam. In the upper corner, we have children in Bilgaon, which you saw yesterday in Ye Jadesh video, also underwater. This is Trishul. This is the Bal Mela, the annual sports day that they have for the children. So from 12, 13 different Jeevanshalas around the mountains in this Narmada tribal section in Maharashtra, Gujarat, and Madhya Pradesh, children come and meet and have sports competitions and so forth.
School is not underwater. The electricity thing there.
Oh.
School is above the water.
Okay, great. Happily to correct it. Bilgaon School is still there, and Trishul is also still there. This is a tribal community in the Eastern Ghats in Andhra Pradesh, Kond Adivasis. They're also struggling for land, livelihood, and education. I believe Asha is also supporting the schools in this community. They are run in a playway model of education that was developed by a social worker there, P.D.K. Rao. And so here you see some of them in action. They're also struggling for land and livelihood and rations, all issues. Koya Adivasis from Chhattisgarh had to flee in 2008-2009 due to Salwa Judham. The state unleashed Operation Green Hunt, forced people out of their villages. Some of them ran to the forests, but many of them came into hiding in Chhattisgarh, but many of them came across the border, into Andhra Pradesh, just through their own, search for materials, constructed these houses. Eventually, one of the local NGOs got in touch with them to start some activities, food and educational activities for their children, and aid supported that. And through that, we got to visit these villages and meet people there. This is from the set of schools I just showed you, Dalit community in Bombay. All the people attending the schools of the Bombay Municipal Corporation do come from, at least 95%, if not more, come from a minority community as well as Dalit backgrounds. So they're a daily struggle for right to housing. Many of them don't know if their house will still be standing tomorrow because of the regular demolitions that BMC conducts. Dignity, as I said, they're all from the Dalit community. They face atrocities and unjust treatment at the hands of government services, livelihood and education. Here are some children from Suradi, which you saw. Ravi talked a little bit about Suradi yesterday. This is a drought-prone village, but it's no longer drought-prone, thanks to the work that they've done over the past 5 to 7 years. And so, though I said struggling for food, water, livelihood, and education, actually, today they're not. So, one question I have for you is what what determines whether, these struggles will reach a point where they can say that they are no longer struggling for the right to life, right to housing, right to livelihood, right to food. What hope is there for all of these communities to move from struggle to prosperity? And I'll just show you one last picture that we just got in a couple of days ago. We are not involved in this village directly, but our speaker at the AID conference last year, Jiten Yumnam, works for human rights in the Northeast, particularly in Manipur, and he sent this picture just the other day of the school submerged by the dam. Now, and we've, of course, seen such cases in other villages as well. Now, when, in school after school, in so many such cases where people's lands are taken, submerged or deforested or acquired for some project and all, you end up with lakhs of people who are displaced and only few who get rehabilitation. So this plays into that same numbers game. Out of all the people who were benefiting from this school, is there a guarantee that they will all be given an equivalent standard of living elsewhere? That's the law, but how many think that they will? Right. So, with that introduction, right? I won't go through the statistics very deeply because we already. First of all, I put them there just to bring out that context, but I think we had a detailed presentation of that earlier today. When I say that the development will reach only the few, how few is that few? That's why I wanted to give an idea with the numbers. So just quickly, if anyone had any doubt as to how unequal society was in India, the left side shows inequality in the U.S. Okay, the top graph being the percentage of income increase of the top 1% compared to the rest. And by comparison, this is India and the world, and you can see India is above the world average as far as income inequality goes. So in short, pretty unequal. So India is no longer called a third world country, but even when it was, there's always been a first world within India that lived just, and clearly there's also a third and fourth world in Florida and in the United States. If you just were curious as how much income you actually need to be in the 1% in India, 11 million people belong to the 1% in India. And for those 11 million people, their per capita annual income is 3.8 lakhs. So that means in a family of four, so let's say the children aren't earning income, but we're just saying the per capita income. So even if there's only one or two earners, that means the total income of the family of four would be 13.2 lakhs. So that family is in the 1%. That 1% is 11 plus million people. The likelihood, which is like more than the population of Greece, to pick an example at the other end of the economic spectrum, it's highly likely that people in that 1% tend to mingle only with others in that 1%. And this affects your worldview, okay? It affects your worldview on whether inequality is a good thing. Is inequality a good thing? Do you think that anybody thinks inequality is a good thing?
I think a lot of people think it.
Would they say so? I mean, yeah, they're enjoying it, but...
No, their argument is that we're unequal beings. Of course.
Okay, all right, so now the growing 1% Indians...
Can be in the 1%.
Hmm?
And then they say, you can be in the 1% too, to everyone.
Well, yeah, so this is interesting because, I don't pick, I'm not putting everything out there, but if you just read the newspaper anytime, you can find articles like this. The good news is that India's 1% club is growing rapidly. What do they mean by that? They mean that in 1993 to 94, the top 20% accounted for 37% of the income. In 2009 to 10, this grew to 53%. And it's expected to touch 59% by 2004 to 15. That means the top 1% is having more and more of the income. And that's good news as far as this newspaper is concerned. This is not an isolated example. Here is our environment minister, who said on the day he took office, he is the Minister of Environment and Forests. He said the job of the Ministry of Environment and Forests is to clear projects. He didn't say it was to protect the environment or the forests. In fact, he said his ministry, if necessary, can denotify the forest land as per the state of aspirations. He said, okay, this is the side art. Sorry it's so crowded, but I just wanted to pick out some quotes for you. The World Bank has something called the Ease of Doing Business ranking. It ranks how easy it is for businesses to get land, get water, get electricity, not pay fair wages, not follow environmental laws. All of these things are collapsed into one number, ease of doing business. When our Prime Minister said India is going to be #1 on this ranking. It's not just going to be easier. I'm not just going to make it easier to do business. India is going to be the easiest place to do business. And to that end, like one of the points I wanted to highlight from this, and this is an article that the Times of India printed as a good news. PMO acts to boost doing business ranking. And what did he act to boost? The Environment Ministry is also being asked to issue instructions to do away with the need for a pollution control certificate as a prerequisite for a connection. This is great. This is going to boost the ease of doing business ranking. I mean, everyone knows if there's a ranking, your job is to get #1, whether it's in school or it's a World Bank. So there you go.
Aravinda, can I request you to just come a bit this side? Yeah, sorry.
So just to compare, I showed you what the top 1% and even the top 100th of a percent. If you know anyone who makes 72 lakhs a year, then that person is likely in the top 100th of a percent. But I showed you those, and just for comparison, and this, I was always in my mind wondering, is this really, is this true or is this exaggerated? But it tallies exactly with the figure that Richa presented us in the morning. So the bottom 77% who are earning 20 rupees a day, which is even below the Planning Commission's poverty line of 32 rupees a day. And so if you want to explore these grim figures in greater detail, I recommend this book. Not just for these figures, but to understand India, to understand where we are today, what is the future, what is the alternate paradigm of development for all, and including education for all, because it is possible. And we can understand it and we can work towards it. So this is a book that in AID we're reading collectively as an AID-wide study group. We have a very leisurely pace of reading a chapter a week over the summer. It finishes on Labor Day, and we'll have a conference call with the authors. And on the website of Churning of the Earth, you can also hear the audiobook if you want to listen in your commute. But I really urge all, if you want to gain confidence in the alternate paradigm of development, in a paradigm of development that actually envisions development for all, a paradigm of education that actually envisions education for all, and not just the few, then I really recommend that you read this book. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip this next slide. Time is not on our side, but this is a quote from the book. We're just going to move on. So, what can we learn from natural resource-based communities? All of the communities I showed you earlier qualify as natural resource-based communities. Their main source of livelihood is land, water, forest, and their labor. And they're typically considered uneducated and illiterate. Of course, many, if not most of them, are interested in gaining literacy as well as education. But what I want to say is it's not a one-way learning. There's so much that we can and must learn from these communities if we're to survive as a whole on the planet. I'd like to just start with a little song. Many primary schools learn, one of the songs that you learn in primary school is exactly opposite to the ethics of these natural resource-based communities. And any guesses on what that song might be? Not this song, but the song that this is opposing. Any nursery rhymes that you can think of? Okay, not that one. Something about rain. Rain, rain, go away. Who sings that? Okay, so here's a song that's sung in the Kond tribal school in G. Margala district. I've put the translation here. It's Vanalabaga Kurwali, rains should fall. Pantalu Menduga Pandali, crops should grow bountifully. Annam Andariki Undali, all should have food. And Shantito Anta Melagali, all should live in peace. So this is the rhyme, and so they in their school they're trying to integrate the lessons with their own local culture, use local rhymes, even local language. The teachers all speak the local language, which isn't Telugu, it's Kond language, but they also learn Telugu and try to bring some of their worldview into Telugu as well. So, taking this lesson that rains should fall and all should have food, now I'll come to my own journey in my years, with aid. So I started working in India in 1998, and one of the first things I heard so many organizations talking about was a particular grain that was good for the farmer, was good for the land, good for our health, good for the economy, good in times of rain or no rain. Aid is all about interconnected solutions, and it looked like this grain represented an interconnected solution. Anybody know the grain? Other than Kiali? All right, so this is one of the many varieties of millet. It's called finger millet. In Telugu, it's called ragi, nachni, soldu, mandya, different language. Different regions have different millets. So this is a millet that grows in Srikakulam district, and so we embraced it enthusiastically. Of course, we found that many people in the village were, only the elder generation was eating millet. Our generation, next generation, wasn't eating millet. Why? Anybody?
It was a poor people.
It was?
It was a grain for poor people.
Yeah, it was a grain for poor people.
I remember my mom telling me that please eat this, and that was when they couldn't get rice.
Your mom said eat it or don't eat it?
No. She said they used to eat it.
Oh, they used to eat it. Okay, right.
When they couldn't get rice.
Well, it's back in vogue. If you go to the shops in Bombay, you get all kinds of things made of all kinds of millets. And, why should people lose their tradition of eating this food and only regain it after it comes into vogue? What about the people who are still growing it, still know how to eat it? Is it possible that they could also value and recognize the value of that food? So we talked about millet, met with a similar reaction that this is not cool. It's not packaged. There's no label. Now you will actually see millet that's packaged and labeled, but we were talking about 10 years ago. So long story short, we also working in these villages, kind of going door to door to understand people's living conditions and who were really the poorest of the poor, where was hunger more severe. We started a program to actually identify families where children were malnourished and provide them with millet. And so it's a local grain, it's a local solution for a local problem, and it's been going on for several years with steadily encouraging results. And at the same time,
but we also have to point out that actually, millets have better nutritional things than rice. So they may have been viewed as a grain for the poor by some people, but they're actually richer.
Yeah, millets are definitely more nutritious than rice, and part of that fashionable, part of what made rice fashionable was that that shows that you don't actually need such a strong food. Like you don't do hard labor. You can eat like white rice that has no nutritional value because you don't need it, and so that status symbol is also there. That's all the white foods are like white bread. When did idlis become white? It's made of black gram. How did it become white? You use the black gram as black gram, your idli will not be white. How did bread become white? Even chapati is being mixed with. This whole whiteness of the food has this social and other component attached with it. So yes, it's more nutritious than rice. It's more nutritious than cow's milk. So actually, this is traditionally one of the first foods that young babies ate because it's easy to digest. But with the rampant promotion of packaged food and trying to grab the customer as early as possible, starting from infancy through the powdered milk and so forth, that's also been displacing millet. So we took it all on. We took on the nutrition for the babies, nutrition for the mothers. All of these things became part of our awareness campaign when we were just speaking with people in the village. And oh yes, I wanted, so these are going to connect later, but the other local skill, the other local resource that we found in the Srikakulam villages was spinning, which was still being done at the household level, and there was also a Khadi Bandar there, and now there are lots of weavers in this area. So we'll return to the spinning and weaving component. As I said, we started a program of just going and identifying malnourished children and delivering millet to them and checking upon them every 6 months to see how they were doing, weighing the babies, talking to the families, and talking about all of these issues. In the process of talking about all of these issues, so the one person was asking about the breakfast, right? In the process of talking about all of these issues, we asked about the government program that's designed to give supplementary rations to families with young children, the Anganwadi system, the ICDS. It was not functioning in these villages. Many people said, where is it? When we've never got anything, or we got something 2 years ago, I haven't gotten anything since. So we went door to door. We asked people to document when they had received anything from the Anganwadi and signed a letter to the collector. Here's the collector. Just a small anecdote, this problem had been there for a few years. The previous year, we had also tried to bring it to the notice of the collector, but we couldn't. When they changed collectors, this new collector had a system, which every collector is supposed to have, of just having an open day, and anybody can line up and bring their grievance to the collector. So he dutifully attended his open day every week, stayed till every last person in line came. And when he received our complaint, he ordered an inquiry. So first of all, he ordered the inquiry himself, and he sent someone to go check on whether the Anganwadi was working. That person entered the village, found one of those PCO phones, called back and said, yes, it's working. And so then, the word spread that happened, so we went back to him, and then you can't really see her, but this woman here is the director of the ICDS for that district. And so he called her and us and said, you both pick a day when you can have this meeting. You can conduct this inquiry and find out what's going on with the Anganwadi. So, that way the date of the inspection was made public. So all the villagers also came, and this is also a lesson to not necessarily believe everything you read, because if you read the report, you will see that okay, Anganwadi is working as expected. If you read the records of all the Anganwadi workers, down to the decimal point, how many grams of grains, dals, oils, and wheat they have given to every. Thanks to the RTI Act, people could directly write a letter saying, how much grain have you given me in this month or in these 6 months? As per your records, how much grain have you given me? And then if they didn't actually get that grain, they have a way of disputing it. So we did all of those things. If, as you may know, the families who are below poverty line don't have to pay an application fee to file an application. And here's the joint inquiry. You can see the whole village is there. And so one of the points of contention was the measuring cup used to hand out the grains. They're supposed to, and the system for giving the grains is so complicated. Every 12 days, you have to give this much. Every 13 days, you have to give something else. And, it's not just like give them 2 kilograms a month. This 2 kilograms is just divided in such installments that it's very difficult for anyone to monitor. And then kilograms is not like who has a scale. They certainly don't provide it, when they're doing this. So they have some measuring cup. And so, just joint inspection of, what are your measuring cups? What is the schedule? What do you have in the records? Let's just have it all out. And as a result of this process, the services were improved. In some cases, like in one village, the person running the Anganwadi was running it out of her home, which she has the right to do. But if you're running it out of your home, you have to treat that part of your home as a government office. All have to be allowed to come and go as they please. That she wasn't doing. So, and she also wasn't distributing the grain. So, as a result, that was moved out of her home to a public place. All these kinds of improvements were made, but more importantly, the people knew that they could ask these questions and they were entitled to answers. They knew that they were entitled to this much rice and grain every month, even if it was alternate Sundays and alternate Thursdays. But I mean, now when you see these villages, you see much more awareness of what they're entitled to get from the Anganwadi and actually getting it. But does that address the heart of the matter of people's nutrition? Because what the Anganwadi is still giving them is it's like a low grade of white rice and wheat and oil and dal. And whereas what we know that a local grain in their own village, which is far more nutritious, is not being supplied through the public distribution system. It wouldn't, instead of us as an NGO buying this grain and handing it out, how much more impact would it have if the government would procure that grain? It would support the local farmers, and it would be delivering superior nutrition to the people in those villages. So actually in Anantapur district, they have brought in local grains into the public distribution, and there are efforts, ongoing efforts to spread this to other districts as well. So that, I mean, if that happens, that would definitely be an improvement. But at the very least, we don't want to go in the opposite direction, which is supplying. There's Anganwadi, ICDS serves millions and millions of children. So guess who has their eye on that? The food industry. The food industry would love to have that ready market for their products, and they're the ones who can have labels. Every advertisement for packaged food it's always showing that this will make you smarter, and it's all false. It's illegal also. I mean, there are laws against false advertising. There are laws against advertisement of food for children below the age of 2. Because then that's considered an infant milk substitute, and so there are strict laws governing the marketing of infant milk substitutes, all being violated, and even getting government contracts in the process. So all of those things are points where we're still trying to raise an awareness. And see, I bring this up specifically because here we have an erosion of traditional knowledge with the invasion of these. The packaged food industry, which can command so much intellectual might. They can send reports. The junk food that they get, do I have a picture of it? Okay, this is being distributed by the Anganwadi. This is an infant milk substitute. In complete violation of the law, they are distributing this. It's called Bala Amritam, nectar for babies, okay? It has the government seal on it. It has the picture of some minister and all this stuff. So, here we are on the one hand, trying to raise awareness for local food, whole grains, fresh food, and on the other hand, they're being given this by the government. Here's another junk food that they're getting through the Anganwadi. Again, it says AP government product. On the if you can't, I don't know if you can see it. It says with technical support of National Institute of Nutrition. So this food industrial complex has lobbied its way into the system and is distributing these things, and it's taking people away from their own food traditions, which are far superior to the ones that these great educated nutritionists are giving them. So I just briefly come back to this picture. This is from the homes we visited in Khammam district. So these are the Koya Adivasi communities who had to flee from Chhattisgarh, being in hot pursuit by the Salajudam, like running through the forests with their babies in their arms and their bags on their back. And in those bags, they carried their seeds. They carried the seeds of their local grains, including other kinds of millets. There's sama, korra, many kinds of millets. They carried, and they had to just find their way in the forest, build houses of the material they could find, clear some land and grow what they could. And some of the things they could grow, you can see here, they're just drying them in front of their houses. They're processing these coarse grains, they're called coarse grains, these different kinds of millets and all, they're processing it themselves. This is a skill that they have and they haven't yet lost. But with so-called modern development, modern education, modern food, it is almost guaranteed that in the next generation, they will be lost unless we act now to change the direction of these things. Unless we act now to recognize these people as experts, as resource persons who can show the way for food for all. Millet is a grain that can move us towards the goal of food for all because it's farmer friendly, land friendly. It's more nutritious for us, and it's a grain where the growers can use all the parts of the grain, like for their houses, for their animal fodder, for so many things. So this is a knowledge and a skill that these people have not yet lost, but they will, now that they have been displaced from their community, from their tribal community into this place where they're dependent on wage labor, where they're dependent on rations from the government, which is again white rice. That unless we change the direction of education and development, then these skills will be lost and have to be retaught. And when the skill moves from the hands of the illiterate to the literate, it comes at a price, and it's affordable only to the few, whereas now it's affordable to all. So it's moving from being something for all to something for the few. Along the same lines, breastfeeding is something that I take very seriously. I think it's obviously the foundation for lifelong nutrition. It's another skill that is being that is being eroded. It's being devalued. The food industry wants to get customers as early as possible, and so it's always easy to make a woman doubt the power of her own body, from birth to breastfeeding to in all aspects. So this is something that has adversely affected breastfeeding. These are this is a scene from some villages where some women had actually been persuaded that they could not breastfeed, but with just a little encouragement, they were able to lactate again. And by the way, this is not something that affects. I mean, this is a problem across rich and poor. So this message that that mother's milk maybe isn't good enough or isn't enough is something that's being propagated rampantly at every level. And so this is something that we have tried to address across the board. Yes, the next picture shows that. So getting back to, now this is an example of a product that brings together our interest in food as well as our interest in clothing. Getting our clothing in a way that is sustainable. One of the areas that we have been working on, I don't know if you're familiar with Jivika, that's our Livelihood Initiative. So we get eco-friendly, fair trade. We get products that are produced in eco-friendly ways using less energy, more employment. So hand spun, hand loom, home-based employment where people have more control over their wages and working conditions, vegetable prints. So giving value to these kinds of skills that are that give employment to a greater number of people and consume less energy and create less burden on the environment, either toxins from chemical dyes or the final step would be to have pesticide-free cotton, and we haven't gotten there yet in all cases, but if we could get to that component, and then once we got there, we would also have to then just reduce the total amount of clothing that we produce and consume, because that's really the biggest burden that we pose in our consumption of clothing, is just the sheer volume of it. That said, we are still in the business of marketing clothing that's produced in this way, using khadi, using these vegetable print and other resources. And so one of the unique products that we have is this nursing kurta, because as culture, as it becomes culturally less common to be breastfeeding in public, these kind of nursing kurtas make it more convenient and just make it maybe a little bit more popular. And so this actually has been very popular. In the villages, thankfully, it's still, maybe breastfeeding is, people are getting the message that they have to give the powdered milk and all, but they haven't been given the message that they shouldn't be breastfeeding in public yet. That's going to come. But in cities, that message is already loud and clear. And so while we oppose that message as well, we try to encourage people to get comfortable with these kinds, because a lot of the nursing clothes that are sold in the city, I don't know if any of you have ever looked at the options for buying breastfeeding friendly clothing in India, but in most of it what I mean most of it, there's only one kind. It's the night dress, as if you will only wear a nightie when you're nursing. So we want day dresses as well. We want you to be able to nurse anywhere, anytime, and just be normal. So that's a product that has come out of what we have learned, trying to bring that learning back home and share it, both in the terms of living lightly on the earth, eco-friendly fair trade products, and practicing a solution that is healthier for the people and the planet. I already talked about these things. So I was, let's see, how are we doing on time? We okay? I'm going to move quickly to another topic that has come up at the village level. I had mentioned briefly how this discrediting of breastfeeding is part of a larger discrediting of a woman's body as a whole. And one area where this message is drilled home is in connection with menstruation. Menstruation is the time when the woman's body is marked as somehow less, somehow not quite good enough, maybe not clean, not pure, not capable. It can be disguised in different terms. They can say, you need rest, or you need, you have too much energy. All of these things are just ways of saying that, now there's something a little bit dangerous about you, and so we are going to we're going to have some special rules and regulations for you. Now, we hear stories of menstruating women having to be segregated into the cow shed or something like that. Now, even in houses where you're not doing that, there's still this remnant of menstrual untouchability, and that is there in the village, in the city, in Florida, wherever you may be. This menstrual taboo is an example of untouchability. And simply because it's an untouchability that affects women, it's been euphemized into all kinds of other things. That, okay, well, it's not the same thing. It's actually for women's own good. Okay, every oppression of women is always described as something that's actually for women's own good. So we have tackled this head on. One of the products that we made as part of our Livelihood Initiative, I mean, we make so many other products out of khadi as well, just to let you know. If you're curious, just please look at the AID website. But this is a product that, we started making just because we thought it was a good livelihood project, that this is something that women could sew and gain income. By the way, not only women, even male tailors are also sewing this. But in the process of making and marketing these things, we also fought menstrual untouchability, menstrual untalkability. Now, people can talk about it, laugh about it, when you're packing it or giving it to the courier, like, oh, because this is a village in remote Srikakulam district, and they get orders for these menstrual pads from all over the country, even all over the world. So every now and then these packages go to the courier office, and they all know what they are. And so we now actually we started this a few years ago, and more people have entered the market. Now, one of the things you see here is the pads hanging to dry in the sun. It's very important to hang them in the sun, because the sun it makes them dry quickly. It disinfects, and if they end up drying them under the bed or something like that, then it's not hygienic. So asserting your right to dry the cloths in the open and just talk about menstrual health has made a difference. Now it has opened us up to other health issues that are affecting the women here. So that's something that we're planning to address in the coming years. you would be I was anyway surprised to find out, I don't know if this is common knowledge, but there's a team in Hyderabad who did a survey. I found out by talking to some of the women in this village that first of all, there's a highly irrational use of medicine. Any small cramp or complaint that they go and explain to the doctor, it's highly likely that they will be given hormone-altering medicines, and even all the way to hysterectomy can be something that's recommended to you for something as even just like white discharge can lead you to a recommendation for a hysterectomy. So I was talking about this to some doctors, to somebody in Hyderabad who knew an organization in Hyderabad that has devoted their mission to eradicating this unindicated hysterectomy, because it's a rampant problem not only in Andhra Pradesh but all over. Again, the tendency to just jump to the conclusion that the woman's body isn't good enough. So it's all part of a package, from birth to menstruation to breastfeeding to giving birth and breastfeeding to handling your reproductive life at every part of the cycle. So this is something that has come out of our work in this area, but that the health component is something that we're just getting into now. On the one hand, we're eradicating menstrual taboo. On the other hand, there are people working overtime on the internet to tell you why it's actually not such a bad thing after all. So that it's part of our ancient wisdom and culture, and actually it's empowering women, and So I have taken it upon myself to expose these fallacies. This is a blog that I write called Ask Amma, where I try to bring a lot of the lessons that learned from our experience in the village to just our everyday life at home with our families and our community. So it's called Peace, Justice, and Sustainability on the Home Front, and that's the subtitle. The title is Ask Amma. This is an article called 7 Fallacies about Menstruation and Culture. It was picked up by a blog called Menstrupedia, which is a really popular website that has a very active forum on lots of questions and answers. They even have a comic book to help explain, to menstruation in a way that's just normal, there's nothing to be afraid of. And so, so these are some examples of how our experience in the village has led us to trying to find ways to solve problems, but more importantly, not be part of the problem. So we can be part of the solution. We should also examine the ways in which we are part of the problem. And a major way that we can, a major way for us to cut our contribution to the problem is to just examine our everyday life. Everything we do, everything we eat, buy, wear, everything. How does it relate to the big picture of development? So as Ravi explained yesterday, so in AID we talk about Sangharsh, Seva, and Nirman. So Sangharsh is the protest against, for example, when I talked about the industrial food and their access to Anganwadis, their false advertising, all of that would be Sangharsh, trying to cut the problem at the source. But the consumer is also driving, who would be producing packaged food if we weren't all eating it? So who would be producing all these disposable products if we weren't all buying it? So we have to take that personal responsibility as well. And so in Bombay, for example, we have the farmers market where people can meet, just like you have farmers markets here, right? So, but in Bombay, the farmers come, and it has an atmosphere similar to what you have here. You'll not only have farmers, you'll have small artisans, somebody who teaches charkha, people who bring their arts, and some local musicians, street musicians. So trying to recreate that sense of community and know your farmer, know your local shopkeeper, and also know your neighbor. Like, just get away from the isolation of modern life. Yes, Kelly?
They have national streets for performing arts at every farmer's market. Somebody's there, and sometimes they have a skit, and a lot of times they have music playing, sometimes they have drum set.
Right. So like in Bombay, there's the elite cultural institution called the National Center for Performing Arts. So this organization is called National Streets for Performing Arts, and they bring street artists to the farmers market. So looking at the environment, wages, working conditions, and how our everyday life contributes to that is part of what we mean by living lightly on the earth. And these are some of the lessons we've learned from the communities who do live lightly on the earth, the communities who are living on natural resources with less energy and less waste and less pollution. So I already talked about most of these things. This is how we got involved in aid broadly, but also even in the micro level, the issues of food, clothing, household products, all of these things have come into our purview. And so now bringing the lessons home, how this has become part of the life of aid volunteers. We were talking about the women's issues earlier. One of the women's issues that affects rich and poor alike, in fact, affects the rich probably even, I mean, the dowry for the rich is the top of the market. So Say No to Dowry is a campaign that we started in early 2000 at the 2002 aid conference. We all took a pledge, but just because we took it in 2002, it doesn't mean that everybody suddenly stopped doing it. So it's a discussion that we keep alive, and I think we have a picture here. This is the conference. So India Together picked this up, this anti-dowry pledge, and it raised a lot of discussion because just because we're all nice and progressive and well-educated, it doesn't mean that this problem doesn't exist either with us or with our family members, our friends, or somebody close to us. And in aid meetings, people have shared their personal stories, often very painful stories of how they have had to deal with this issue in their own families. So this is at the Charlotte conference, which was 2 years ago. So we had to renew this pledge, and believe it or not, you know, it was debated a bit as to, you know, is this really a women's issue? Is this really not just, you know, there's many views on this. So it's good to keep those discussions alive and not just assume that these are problems of the poor and uneducated, because they're as much or more being propagated by the rich and educated. So we talked about menstrual taboo. So again, this is not something affecting only people in the villages. As I said, the internet is full of articles that are, you know, going the other way. Fortunately, you know, the campaign, a group of several NGOs started this campaign called Period of Change. So, in one of the meetings in Dallas, a bunch of aid volunteers held up signs giving reasons why, you know, I support Period of Change. So this was one of the internet campaigns that we participated in. And I'll just tell you what Kiali's sign said, because this was actually a contest. This was put out by a group called the Kachra Project. And so her sign says, I support Period of Change because periods don't pollute, but disposables do. And so that was actually their winning entry. And okay, say no to plastic bags. A lot of us have the big bags like we just got in the Asha conference that are reusable, and we take them to the grocery store, but then at the store, you have those endless rolls of little bags, and they're, you know, in India too, when you go to the market, you might have your big bag, but for each little fruit and vegetable, they'll put it in another plastic bag. And so I mean, how can we bring food from farm to the plate without packaging? This is the challenge. A generation ago, everybody did this. So why suddenly now are we worse at this? We can be as good as at this. So this is another product that we're making. This is unbleached, hand-spun, hand-loom cloth. It is printed. So that's, you know, but the message I felt was important enough to print. Remember me, reuse me, because lots of times people get a lot of these bags, but they forget to take them to the store. So finally, you are only saving resources if you actually reuse the bag. So that's why we decided to go ahead and print that and encourage people to just go plastic free. We're still in July. There's a campaign called Plastic Free July, a challenge to actually go plastic free. I sort of, you know, I don't think I've actually done it 100%, but I've tried to do it. And one thing I decided, because it was not possible for me to be to buy things without using any plastic at all, but I decided to buy a minimum of 5 pounds of something. So then it'll be, you know, if I get something in a plastic bag, so if I can't use 5 pounds of it, then I have to find someone I can split it with. So again, the know your neighbor thing comes in handy. And these come in 1 and 2 kilo sizes. You can order them from the aid website. You can also go plastic free and support livelihood in the villages. Okay, so this is, imagine Planet Jivika. We've got all these resources to stop using disposables. We've got the menstrual pads, the bulk bags. Down here you can't see them, but they're cloth diapers. This bag is, so we have many such collaborations for fair trade products. The bag is actually with a group in Bombay. They go and collect the factory waste from furniture factories in Bombay. They take those small pieces that are too small to make any upholstery with, they piece them together and make these purses, and so they're upcycled bags. So this is just the bigger set of fair trade products that we have. Now, coming back to our...
I think you're out of time.
Are we out of time?
Yeah, maybe 10 minutes.
10 minutes?
Oh, 5
Okay,
minutes. Maybe.
we'll
5
skip
minutes.
this one.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a teaser. We talked about the Nirmala quite a bit yesterday, so I thought that you might like to see this one, but I'll just summarize what they say.
Since it's a village living image, right?
Oh, since it's a village people like it. Okay, so I'll just show you a little bit. Sound? So police removing protesters from one of the protests against the dam at the Narmada Dam. Now you'll see what one of the activists has to say about this whole process of displacement.
प्राकृतिक घटना है. अरे लड़की ससुराल जाती है तो रोती है, माँ बाप सब रोने लगते हैं. ये प्राकृतिक है, लेकिन जाते कि जाना तो है ही.
Okay. So, as a girl cries when she goes to her mother-in-law's house. So ever since I saw this, I thought to myself that for all the people being displaced, all the people suffering all this exploitation, it's not Mother India, it's mother-in-law India. So now the question is, can the mother-in-law understand the daughter-in-law? Can we have that solidarity? Can we have one big happy family? Or is it going to be either or, right? Is it going to be for we were talking about India and Bharat, right? This is something, it's not a fully formed metaphor, but just consider all of these people who are displaced, right? Only a few of them are going to get an alternative. The rest of them are going to, you don't know what happens to them. I mean, they're going to be those 77% living on 20 rupees a day or dying on 20 rupees a day. So now you are faced with the choice of, believing in development for all. You don't know whether you'll get it or not, but you'll believe it and you'll act accordingly, or give up on that and just try to make sure you're in the 20%. So that is analogous to the bargain that I showed you right at the beginning, right? So now how do I get back? I have to press escape. So now I'm going to show you a picture of one of the girls in that class, in the BMC classroom. Oh, the next slide. Okay, here we are back to that initial class that we were talking about. What are you going to tell her? Look at her. She's full of hope. She's standing there, ready to get all the benefits of being, here. How far did she have to come to even be in this school, right? And she's ready to learn, ready to succeed, ready to do it all. Is it going to be Mother India for her? Or is it, so what is the bargain that she will have to take? So I'm going to, it's a little bit abrupt, but I'm going to go to, oh, okay. Yeah, I'll show you what happened in the movie later. We'll go back. Okay. One of their lessons in the Sangati class, in the Sangati curriculum, concerns caste. They read a Premchand short story about the well, somebody's well, Thakur ka kuam. And the other story they read is about Eklavya. So Eklavya, you know the story of Eklavya. Now you know what Dronacharya asked Eklavya. Now after this whole lesson, they've told the story. Now the teacher says, what would you do if you had? Okay. So you know the question, right? He's the Dronacharya asked for the time. Okay, anyone, what would you do if Dronacharya asked you for that Guru Dakshina? What would you do? Yeah?
What would your friend if he didn't do it?
We don't know
You
yet.
don't know.
We don't know. We're not telling you the alternative and then asking what will you do. We are just telling, Dronacharya stood before you, and asked you for this. What would you do? Anybody? Run away, walk away? Anybody?
I would say no.
You would say no. Anyone else?
Say no.
No? Any alternative answers?
जो एकलव्य ने किया अपने गुरुजी को दक्षिणा में अपना अंगूठा दे देते और किसी का विचार आप क्या करते जो एकलव्य ने किया मतलब गुरु के अंदर आपकी इतनी निष्ठा है गुरु को बहुत मानती है मोदी मांगी में पूरी भी दे देंगे बहुत सही और
Just to let you know, the fourth boy said he wouldn't do it. Okay, that's not in the video, but they had to really, really dig deep. If the first person had said no, maybe they might not have even asked anymore, but they were waiting for someone to give that answer that they wanted, yeah?
You're supposed to be able to give any answer.
That's right, that's right. In fact, that's why I could see the conflict. After the very first answer, the teacher was surprised, but he knew that he couldn't object because the whole purpose was for you to say what you thought. Now, yesterday I said something like we need to look for other indicators, Now, if you look at this and you think, okay, so an indicator that they learned this lesson of the wrongness of the caste injustice would be that when they ask this question, what would you do? That they would say no. Now let's say that was our indicator. Now we see that they did not meet that indicator. So what does that tell you? Yeah?
Well, maybe they expected that they were supposed to do whatever the person
say yes.
said.
Maybe.
As a teacher asking them that question, of what would you do if
there's multiple levels. Yeah, I would say that it's not the student who, this is not a mark of the success or failure of the student. This is the success or failure of our society to give the confidence of development for all.
It's also the way in which you have told the story because he didn't actually teach him anything. He was just looking and learning, so it's
yeah, I mean, I didn't include the story, but see, I think that one thing is that the story is called Eklavya. Who is the hero of the story? Always Eklavya is portrayed as a heroic, somebody that you wrote a story about, right? So, yeah.
If he had told the story without telling the names, say there's one guy and there's another guy, and he wants to learn, and without telling the context of the cultural and the story in the scriptures, maybe they would have answered differently, probably, because because then they are just objectively thinking about the right and wrong on their perspective, and not thinking about what Eklavya, the good guy, did.
I hadn't thought of that. So before I let you go, we'll see another moment from that class. To give us some hope. Next. Okay. All right. Now I've shown you all these things just to make us think a little bit more about the classroom dynamics. Okay, but on the whole, I mean, visiting the school was very uplifting and seeing this program, even within the constraints. I think that it's starting the discussion. And we have to be prepared for the vish that comes out when we churn the ocean. And we have to hear those hard truths. We have to hear that people still don't have the confidence to reject that plate, right? they still think they have to follow the system and take what they can get because otherwise they may not get anything at all. Okay, now I just want to show you one more thing that will bring us back to our sense of wholeness. Oh, how do I do? Our sense of wholeness. Oh, wait, sorry. Okay, so this is about what women are doing with their new opportunities.
तो पहले से हर औरतें ज्यादा पढ़ी लिखी हो गई तो उतनी ही रह गई। आप भी पढ़ लिख कर कुछ बनना चाहती हैं, क्या बनना चाहेंगी? वकील? अरे ताली बजाओ।
So on that note, now I can give you your happy ending. We'll go back to here, and we'll see the rest of that scene. Is that? Oh, here. Okay, we'll just see the rest of that scene.
మా నాన్నతో నేను పంచుకోలేదు నాకు అక్కర్లేదు. మా నాన్నకి దూరమై నేను బతకలేదు. నన్ను మర్చిపో శేఖర్.
పాప, నీ కోసం మీ నాన్న తన సర్వస్వాన్ని త్యాగం చేయగలిగాడు. నువ్వు మీ నాన్న కోసం నీ జీవిత సుఖాన్ని వదులుకోగలిగావు. మీకు కులగోత్రాలు వంశ మర్యాదలు లేవు కాబట్టి అది సాధ్యమే. మా వంటి గొప్పవాళ్ళు అవన్నీ పుస్తకాల్లో చదువుకోవచ్చు.
Make sure these values aren't something you can only read in books.